welcome to our special show. Today we're in conversation with Jeff Kinney. Now, if you don't know who he is, you've either been living under a rock or you don't have children, because he's one of the most popular writers of children's books. His extremely popular series, Wimpy Kid, is now in its 18th, this is the 18th edition or 18th book on the Wimpy Kid series to come out. So a big applause here for Jeff Kinney with us today. As you can see, we have a full house. I mean, we don't even have enough chairs. There's so many kids who wanted to be here, Jeff. So thank you so much for being here today with us and your 18th book. Did you ever imagine when you wrote the first Wimpy Kid that you'd be writing an 18th story?
No, I never did. I thought I was just writing one big book. In fact, my first draft of Diary of a Wimpy Kid was 1,300 pages long. So it was a really big, thick book. And then my publisher said, hey, you've written a children's series. Let's chop it up. And I can't believe it's been 18 books. It's been a long time.
18. And there's going to be a 19th and a 20th
Yes.
as well. Well, first and foremost, tell us, how did you start this journey of writing? Because you didn't want to be a children author at the beginning. You wanted to be a cartoonist.
That's right. I wanted to be a cartoonist, a newspaper cartoonist. Are newspaper cartoons popular here in India?
Yes, they
Yeah?
are. I mean,
Like
well,
Snoopy,
newspapers
Peanuts?
now are also something that is not as popular as
Right.
it used to be. But yes, newspaper cartoonists. Though we get a lot of syndicated ones from the U.S.,
I see.
of course.
Well, that was a big part of my life growing up. Every morning I read the comics, and that's what I wanted to be. So after college, I tried to become a cartoonist, and nobody liked my work. Everybody rejected it, and I didn't know what to do. So for 3 years, I tried and tried. Everybody said, your work's not good enough. And so I needed to figure out some other way to get my cartoons into print. And that's when I came up with the idea for Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And I worked on it for 8 or 9 years before I showed it to anyone at all, because I was so nervous what people were going to think. So I feel really lucky to be published.
Oh my God, and today you're published in so many different languages, millions of copies sold all over the world. It's incredible. You're so popular in various countries. In India, as you can see, extremely popular here as well. Did you ever imagine that, I mean, when you were writing it, you were obviously writing it for your American audiences?
Well, I just want to say how special it is for me, the feeling of being here in India and to see kids here that have come out to see me. I was here last 7 years ago.
Yes, I remember. I met you here.
Yeah, and now there's a new crop of kids who like the books, and it's just so cool for me. I live in this little town in the U.S. called Plainville, Massachusetts. And it sounds really small and boring, and it really is. And so when I work on these books, I think, I don't know who's going to like this. I get really nervous that I can't think of another funny joke. And then a few months later, after I get the book published, I go out into the world and I get to meet the fans. And India is really special for me because India in particular has really embraced me and embraced these books.
Absolutely. We're going to talk more about your India connection. But first and foremost, how much of you is there in Wimpy Kid, or your family, if you could share with our audience?
Yeah, there's a lot of me in Greg Heffley. When I was a kid growing up, I was very flawed. I was a lot like Greg, full of imperfections. I wasn't the strongest kid. I wasn't the smartest kid. And I really wanted to capture that because I think books can be two things. I think books can be windows into other worlds. If you think of Harry Potter, that's a window into another world. And sometimes books are mirrors. And those are the books that help us see ourselves. And so Diary of a Wimpy Kid's a mirror book. I think for any kid out there that isn't the strongest or the bravest or the most popular or the smartest, that's a book for them because they can see the humor in life.
And do you think that's what resonates for kids? Because, there's so much of superheroes and etc. Harry Potter also was a special child, very popular, a lot of magic. You have all the superheroes that they all follow in the Marvel world, etc., etc. So Greg is not a hero. There's nothing very special. He's an ordinary little kid, always trying to, get away with things, or, so it's nice to see. It's endearing. Do you think that's what really appeals to the kids?
I think so.
The anti-hero in a sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's even a little bit different than that. If you think about what I might have in common with a kid who grew up in India, is that we have a lot of the same elements of our childhood. We have parents and teachers and bullies and pets and homework and tests and all these things. These are just this is just the fabric of our life. And I think in a way what traveling around the world has really taught me is that we share this common childhood. And that gives me a lot of hope for humanity because we share something very fundamental in common. I think that's one of the reasons that kids can relate to the Wimpy Kid books.
That's right, and I find it, because it's a very American school system, and Greg is in middle school. There are all sorts of American issues, cafeterias, etc., lockers, etc., which a lot of our kids don't have, but yet they love Greg and they love his stories.
Now, I'm very curious about this. You say you don't have lockers. I understand that, but how do you not have cafeterias? Where do kids eat in the middle of the day?
Well, some schools do have cafeterias. We have all various systems
Yep.
of, carrying your food to school, etc.,
I
tiffins,
see.
etc.
Interesting.
So it's all different, but, your books are, it's an American way, but yet the kids love it and they find something very endearing and, they look forward to the next book. If we talk about No Brainer, I've read it. It's a fun book, and I like this little take you had about the library in this, because you talk about, I don't want to give too much away, the kids are going to read it, but about how the library, a lot of books are missing because parents had certain issues with certain books, and
Yes.
I know this reflects a bit of what is happening in America at this point, and it's interesting that in a very, funny way you've managed to, put that into the book.
Yeah, something that's going on in the U.S. right now is that a lot of books are getting banned, and that means they're taken off the shelves. And so what happens is a parent complains about a book. They say it has inappropriate language or rude content or something like that.
And in your book, if the crocodile is not wearing pants.
Right, there's a crocodile. He's a cartoon crocodile, sort of like Donald
exactly.
Duck is a cartoon duck. And a parent complains. They say, the crocodile isn't wearing pants, right? So the librarian has to draw little pairs of pants on all the crocodiles. So I'm just trying to point out, I'm using my comedy to point out a ridiculous situation. And so I don't know if it resonates here because I don't think books are being banned in this way here, but I'm sort of making fun of it in a way that kids can understand.
That's right, and it's very interesting, and it's poignant as well. You talk about how the library has all these empty shelves. If we talk about your India connection, this is the second time you're in India. You also had a very special relationship with one of your Indian readers. I think you're still friends with the mother, Priya. If you could tell, our audiences a bit about that.
Yeah, about 10 or 11 years ago, a mom reached out to me, and her son's name was Pranav Gupta. And he was very sick, but he was a big fan of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. And on Christmas Day, we FaceTimed one another. I saw into his home. He saw into my home. He met my family. I met his. And I felt like we formed a really special bond over a short period of time. And so what happened was he passed away. He was so sick that he passed away.
And that's why the mother got in touch with you, I
That's
think.
right. And so I've stayed friends with Priya, his mom, and his father as well. And in fact, I saw her 7 years ago for the first time when I was here in India. And last night I saw her again. And tomorrow we're going to do some tourist things together. So I think it's really cool that these books bonded us. Two people from really different cultures, different parts of the world, but have created a real friendship. And I think that's something that stories do. They can bind. They can really make people bond over the same issue.
All right, and we were talking about, the librarian in your book earlier, and I think libraries is something that's a bit of a passion for you, and it's great to get, kids to read. I think not enough is being done to push kids more into reading. There's so many distractions these days with the screens and whatnot. So this is something that you're pushing. It's a passion of yours?
It is, yeah. So in the United States, we went up and down the coast of California, and we did these events where we celebrated librarians. And we're doing the same thing here. We're giving away thousands of dollars to libraries here in India, because I think the library is the first place that a kid can really make their own choice. Right? A lot of times our parents choose things for us, even our clothes and things like that, gifts for, holidays, things like that. But the library is a place where a kid walks in and they can say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. And it might be Pokemon, it might be sharks, it might be snakes, Who knows what your story is? It could be romance or fantasy. But it's a place that a kid can make their own choice. And I really believe that books set you on a path. Like if I knew right now the 5 books that you most liked as a kid, I think I'd know a lot about you. So I think that the books that we read really shape us into the people that we become.
Right, and so the 18th book on Wimpy Kid and on Greg, how do you keep coming up with the stories? Because the first few, I can imagine, are drawn from your own experiences.
Right.
If you could share some of those experiences. I think there was a funny swimming pool, swimming club experience that you need to share with our audience, but also coming up with new ideas. In this, it's all about the school being in a crisis, and Greg, well, again, I don't want to give too much away, his role in all of that, but yes, if you could tell us about the ideas about Wimpy Kid.
Well, that's the funny thing is people say, how do you get, what do you do when you have writer's block? And I always have writer's block. There are a lot of people who I know who are creative people for whom the ideas just flow. It's not that way for me. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to trick my brain into coming up with ideas. I still don't think I've come up with the ultimate way of doing it, but I'm trying. In every year, like come February or March, I'll start to panic because I don't have any ideas. And I'm like, I know that I'm going to have a book out in November. I know that. I just don't know what's going to be in it. And sometimes it's very late. This book right here, it was May. It was late May before I came up with my idea. And when I had it, I was like, oh, thank God. So I finally got that idea. So I don't know how to get out of writer's block.
All right, and if you could share, some of your experiences that you had that you've managed to put into the books.
Yeah, so I'm guessing it doesn't snow a lot in Delhi. Is that correct? Okay, so that's something we don't have in common. It snows a lot where I grew up in Maryland, which is near Washington, D.C. And one year, my friend and I decided to build a giant snowman. And we wanted to build a snowman that was like 25 feet tall. And so we started rolling a snowball. And after a while, it got to be about that big, and we couldn't move it at all. And so then we had a big guy come help us. So we started pushing the snowball. And when we did, we realized, we looked behind us, and we had torn up the whole lawn. So all the grass got torn up by the snowball. The snowball collected it, right? And we knew we were in like really big trouble. So we tried to cover up the bald patches with snow. And that story actually became a big plot point of Cabin Fever, which is a Wimpy Kid movie that just came out on Disney Plus. And so that was straight from my childhood, something I did that got me in trouble, something I tried to cover up. And all these types of things are the types of things that end up in the Wimpy Kid.
And you had a best friend like Greg's Rowley.
I did, yes, I did growing up. I had one really good friend, and what's really funny is he was a lot like Rowley, and we lost touch after we were 16 years old, maybe 15 years old. And just recently, now we're both 52, he found me again. And
really?
Yeah, and we just spent time together, and it was really weird, but it was really cool because we could look back because we shared this childhood together as well.
All right, well, that's incredible. But so many questions, and I'm sure, but the audience probably wants to ask you a few questions as well, since we have so many young people here. Any of you have any questions you'd like to ask?
What's the most fun thing about being an author?
I can honestly say it's this. Like, this is not normal for me, to come into a studio in India, to have these kids who have showed up. Like, this is what makes it all worth it. And it's just really cool, I gotta say. Like, I don't take it for granted. A lot of authors never get published. They never get their work published. And then even if you become a published author, your chances of success are pretty small. So I feel really, really lucky to have been doing this for 16 years now. And something like this makes me remember this is why I do this. Thank you.
A lot of us here are budding or published authors, but I feel like a lot of us have this...
A lot of you here?
Yes.
Really? Wow, okay.
So I feel like a lot of us have this sense of inadequacy that makes us judge our writing in unjust manners. So as a fully fledged author, how did you overcome that phase of life where you felt like your writing was perhaps the worst in the world?
I still feel like that all the time. And so I don't know, I think that when you write something good and you get good feedback, that makes you feel great. What I think you need to do to become a better author is to show your work to people who are going to criticize you. Because, of course, if you show your writing to your parents or your grandmother, they'll say, this is great, because they're proud of you and they love you, But if you can find that teacher or somebody who will give you honest criticism, that helps you grow. And when you get that criticism, it hurts, but it also helps you grow. And you can't really grow without that little bit of hurt.
Well, you shared that you kept the first manuscript of Wimpy Kid with you for 8 years before you really showed it to someone. So, that just
It's true.
shows.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes, go ahead.
When you were writing the Wimpy Kid books, which book did you enjoy the most while writing?
Ooh, is
I
that
think
a tough one?
Yeah, I think I enjoyed the first one the most because I wasn't on a real deadline. I was sort of, it was self-imposed, which means I gave the deadline to myself. And now writing a book is really difficult because I have to do it. I have to do it. And even if really difficult things come up in my life, I still have to be funny. And here's a crazy story. This is something that happened in the past few years since I last saw you, is that I live in a small neighborhood and a plane crashed into the house next to me.
Oh my
It was one of the
God.
craziest things you could ever imagine. And I was on deadline. And so I had to, even though this tragedy happened right in my neighborhood, I had to still write a funny story. And that's what's tough about being on deadline, is that no matter what happens, you have to keep going.
All right. Yes?
If you weren't an author, what would you be?
I was, let's see, what would I be? I used to run a website called Pop Tropica, which was like a kid's website, like a virtual world. And I liked that work because it was storytelling and it was fun and it was very graphic and cartoony. So I think I'd probably be doing that.
All right. Yes, go ahead.
So the Diary of the Wimpy Kid has been adapted into movies. So how was the adaptation process? How involved were you in it? And what was the experience of seeing your characters coming into life on the big screen?
Yeah, so that's happened in two big phases. The first was live action, which had human actors, right? And now I'm doing animated work. So when we were working with live actors, I wasn't the writer. So I was sort of like a passenger. Like I would show up on set and I would watch the movie getting made. And I didn't have a lot of input. And that was hard because other people were writing the words that my characters were saying. That was honestly really hard. And I think that's hard for a lot of writers. And now I'm doing animated movies. And I just before I got here, finished the 4th script. And I just sent it off. So I'm the writer now. And that's a feeling of power. Because when you're a writer, you write a few words. You say, open on a snowy neighborhood. And it's like with your words, you've created worlds because somebody else animates that. They design it, they create it, but you've done that with the power of your words.
And that's what you wanted to be more involved with the whole movie making
Definitely.
and the creative
May I?
process. Yes, go ahead.
What is your main motivation for writing books?
That's a really good question. I ask myself that all the time. I think that my life is very big and special, and the fact that I get to be here today with you is proof of that. And I've gotten to go to the White House. I get to meet celebrities and sports stars and movie stars, and it's like really fun. And so I think the main motivation is to not lose what I have because I think it's really fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is your favorite character?
My favorite character is Rowley because he's a kid who likes being a kid. And I think that a lot of times, at least it was this way for me as a kid, I was so eager to grow up and get older and stay up later and watch that movie with that higher rating. And I like Rowley because he's uncorruptible. And he's just...
Yes, he's very simple. He's very happy. He wants to be a kid.
Yeah, he's a kid who likes being a kid, and I think that's great.
You just talked about how you added comedy to a ridiculous situation in your new book. I wanted to ask, how do you approach blending humor with life lessons in your books?
Oh, that's a good question.
A lot of deep questions
Yeah, these
coming
are
in.
deep. These are great questions. You've had time to think about them. I'm going to tell you the honest truth is that I don't try to add a lot of life lessons in my books. I think what I'm trying to do is to make you laugh. And I think that if my books were full of life lessons, I think that would get in the way of the humor. Now, in the movies, it's a little bit different because when you tell a story on film, you have to tell an emotionally satisfying story. And an emotionally satisfying story usually comes with a lesson. So it's a little bit different. In my books, I could get away with just trying to be funny, not in film.
Okay, I think last couple of questions. Yes?
At what point of your journey as an author did you realize that you have a really, really big impact on your audience?
That my impact was big?
On your audience,
I see.
if anybody reached out to you.
It-
I think the India...
Yeah, that was
Episode is
pretty
pretty
big.
amazing.
I think that it's grown over time. Like it started off slow and then it started to grow. And then one time when my third book came out, I went to a book signing and usually like 10 people, 100 people might come to my book signings, and all of a sudden there were thousands. And it just happened like that. And it was from that point forward, it's been a really wild ride. And so, but my rings keep expanding. So I get bigger and bigger slices of the world, which is really rewarding.
So many kids writing into you from all over the world.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
What inspired you of becoming an author?
What inspired me? I think it was because I felt like I was born to be a cartoonist, and I just had this burning desire to become that thing. So it was just feeling that this is what I was supposed to do. And I see there's a guy right behind you. Why don't you give him the mic? I'm curious as what he has to say. Yeah.
Did you ever get the cheese touch when you were in school?
Right. I got my fingers crossed right now. The cheese touch. We used to have something in the United States. I don't know if you have anything like this here in India, but we called it the cooties. So it was something where you would touch another kid and it would travel, right? And so I mixed that with this other story where there was a piece of cheese on a playground when I was growing up. It was right underneath the basketball hoop, just like with Greg. And so I mixed those two things together. And what's really funny is that one of my editors early on said, I think you created something that could be like a classic thing in children's literature. And I was like, wow, that's a big deal. And this year, a balloon flew in the Macy's parade, which is these giant helium balloons. It's as big as this room, honestly. And there's Greg like touching the cheese. You know, we have this car that's a big piece of cheese, and he's like reaching down and touching it. And I think the cheese touch now has become sort of a classic, which is cool.
A bunch of kids asking you about it. Yes.
Sir, I just had one question. How did you get the idea of writing Diary of a Wimpy Kid?
It really came from my own childhood, and this is something that I really want to encourage you. Truthfully, in publishing, there's a lot of people who look like me, who grew up like me, who grew up in the United States, you know, and I really think it's time for everybody's stories to be told. Like, I'd like to hear your story. Like, think about this. The stories in Diary of a Wimpy Kid are very ordinary. They're just stories of just an average kid, right? And he's not extraordinary in any way. It's just that funny things happen to him. I guarantee there are things in your life that are happening that are funny, that are exciting, that are sad. You know, write them down because somebody's going to want to hear your story.
Right, and what I like is that in India, you know, we really push our kids to excel and everything, so much pressure. I think that's why they love Greg because, you know, he's just a chilled kid. Yes, go ahead with the question. I think one of the last.
How do you draw so good?
How did I draw so good?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you.
I think that's a big aspect of your book,
Yeah.
to have the cartoon as well as the
Yeah.
writing. I think that draws a lot of kids to reading.
Yeah.
But yes, go ahead.
What's funny is I don't think I'm a very good artist at all. But what I learned when I was drawing cartoons for comic strips, my drawing style was more sophisticated. It was better than the Greg Heffley style. But when I started to draw as a kid, I realized that I needed to simplify it. And I learned a lot about cartooning because cartooning really is the art of simplification. You're trying to make the biggest impact that you can with the fewest number of lines. It's sort of like poetry in a way. So I really tried to simplify my style, and I think I became a better cartoonist because of that.
And one last question from me. Why is Greg always frowning or grimacing on the covers of your book? Every book, I think he's always got like this very troubled face.
That's a great question. I think that the reason I did that is because you're interested in him. You're like, why is this kid frowning? You know, think about it. If he was brave or strong or, you know, or popular, it wouldn't be a very interesting story. So I think you sort of want to know what's going on with this kid, right? Do you mind if I take one more question? Because there's a tall guy in the back that I see.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if he can get a microphone.
Can you send a mic?
We're going to give the mic to that guy up there. Here it goes across there. And then I see one more kid with a microphone. We'll get you too.
So I'm sure you have had a lot of fan interactions. Can you share the funniest one you have ever had?
Oh my gosh, that's such pressure. I should have known you were going to ask a really good question. Okay, here's a funny one. When I used to be in Cub Scouts. Do you have that here? Anything like that?
We have something similar.
It was like a civics organization sort of for boys. And I was the leader. And no kids ever asked me about the Wimpy Kid books, none. And I was the author of these books that they were actually reading. And this one kid, he goes up to me one time and he goes, "What's your name?" And I said, "It's Mr. Kinney." And I was like, oh, finally, somebody's going to be interested. He goes, "What's your first name?" I said, "Jeff." I was like, here it comes. He's going to know. He's going to know. And he goes, "You have the same name as the guy who wrote those books." All right, we'll get that. Do you mind one more question?
All right, one more.
Okay.
So you had worked other jobs as well before being an author. So did that experience help you in any way in writing or illustrating your books?
Yeah, here's something that you'll learn in life, is that it all matters. All the things that you do matter. And I've had lots of different jobs. I was a newspaper designer, like a headline writer. I was a criminal justice major in college. I became a medical software programmer. Then I did a games website. And I did all these different things, and all those things helped me to become the person that I became. So you might, in life, you might change careers a lot, but you'll use it all. So just cherish that. And can we just get that one guy? I know we're probably off camera, but he's been waiting.
So, sir, I'm a budding author and I have written some books. So, what do you do to keep yourself creative? And how do you balance the humor and the wit you have in your stories? And I personally, I would say, without any buttering, that I really like your books. And, ma'am, and sir, what suggestions would you give me to bring my books to the next level?
That's a great question. And there's like 4 questions.
Yeah.
I'll try to remember. Here's something that I think is really interesting about your generation, is that your generation is social media native, right? That means that you've never really lived in a time where there wasn't social media, right? So when I was growing up, if I had an idea or something I wanted to share, I had to find somebody to say, yes, I like that, right? In the generation that you're growing up in, you can take the very first thing you think of, film something funny, say something funny, put it on the internet, and then people will like it. They'll tell you if they like it or not, and you'll know if it's good. And I didn't grow up like that, so I think that's really interesting. And what's happening is that people are just putting up like short bits of content, right? And I think that to become a real author, to become good at anything that you want to be good at, you have to put in the time, right? So a lot of people are playing video games, watching anime, watching a lot of TV. There's going to be just a few people in this room, actually, that put in the time to get really good at something, whether it's a musical instrument, whether it's writing, whether it's juggling, doing magic, whatever it is. But those people that put in the time, and I'm talking like 10 years, a long time, those are going to be the people that are really rewarded. So you can't have it quick and easy. So make sure you put in the time to get really good. And then I'll say one more thing is that you asked about wit. That's something I work at really hard. That's my craft, humor. And so that's the thing that I work the hardest at, and it's taken me a long time to get good at it.
All right. Well, on that lovely note, thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us and, answering all these questions. Kids, a big round of applause. Thank you all for watching. And the 18th book is out, so do get it.
Thank you.
Thank you.